it takes 450 years to 1,000 years for something that you mindlessly consume and throw away within 5 seconds. Well, that's the legacy for your children. That's the legacy for the next generation. And that is what you are leaving them as a gift.
The crisis is such a huge one, and it's on a global scale. So, it's very hard to make that judgment call as to whether we are doing enough to make the change.
People think about the planet and about the problem that's happening to the planet, and they think it's just too big a problem, we can't possibly deal with that.
I lived in the United States for 14 years and I came back, and it was the first time I started to notice just how much plastic was on the streets. It seems a lot more than I remember, so I decided about 3 years ago that I would start to try and reduce my own plastic usage. It was only by looking into it and educating myself I found out the horrifying reality of just how much plastic there is in our oceans, on our land, in landfills, in our homes, in our bodies, in the ecosystem.
The rubbish that irritates me the most is the stuff that has been deliberately hidden, and I find that really, really hard to deal with, especially working in the mountains, is that somebody has gone to the effort of moving a rock to hide a plastic bottle under. It's like, I know it's not a good thing, so I'm going to hide it. But if you can go to that much effort to hide it under a rock, why can't you put it in your bag and take it back down with you? That's what really upsets me, is that kind of deliberately hidden rubbish.
We're all aware that there's a bit of a climate crisis going on at the moment, or quite a large climate crisis. We all need to come together now to kind of affect change.
A lot of people leave food waste because they think it'll get broken down, and there's a misconception, I suppose, about banana skins and orange peel being biodegradable. There is a lot of plastic rubbish. A lot of it is like sweet wrappers, so like Starburst wrappers and things like that. And I can kind of get that a lot of it's accidental. You put your hand in your pocket, something comes out when you take your hand out, it gets blown around. But plastic bottles, empty plastic bottles, if you've carried it up the mountain full, I don't understand why you can't carry it back down the mountain empty.
There's been quite a few studies now on litter picks and things like that as to what is the most common piece of plastic. By far and away, it's cigarettes. And parts of that is plastic, but there are also quite a lot of nasty chemicals and things like that that leach into our waterways. There are very many reasons why cigarettes waste is a really big problem.
There is a lot of speculation that tourists create an awful lot of single-use plastic. I mean, tourists often come and they want to travel light, so they do use a lot of single-use products. So it might bring money to the economy, but at the same time it also brings a lot of rubbish, which you then, the company has to, or the country, or the city has to then clear up.
If tourists didn't come to North Wales, I wouldn't have a job taking people into the mountains. I think sometimes there is a view that tourists cause the problem with a lot of the litter that we have around here, and having dealt with a lot of problems in terms of litter locally, I would say that's got nothing to do with tourists. So I think tourists are great for the economy. I think the fact that lots and lots of people come here, and that's been increasing year on year, is obviously going to have an effect.
Tourism is great, it's good for us in the sense of our sort of mental well-being. That said, lots of these big events that happen do generate quite a lot of rubbish, and it is down to the sort of event organisers to clear it up. That there are becoming more and more sort of plastic-free events happening, which is very inspiring, but that doesn't mean that enough has happened yet in order to make the big changes that we need to see happening.
The main thing that I consider about plastic pollution is how much people blame each other and how somehow they're not part of it. People blame corporations, then they blame supermarkets, supply chains. It just seems to me that with plastic pollution, nobody's really willing to accept their responsibility in it. I'm angry that we haven't been properly educated about plastic, but I think one of the problems is the lack of education and the lack of substitutes that we have for plastic. It's so ingrained in our life that, as an advocate myself, learning to remove myself from the plastic environment has been extremely hard.
The problem is that the education goes to the people who are already aware. You know, people who watch Blue Planet, people who take part in volunteer litter picks are the people that already are passionate about it. And I think we need to be targeting people that perhaps aren't excited by that kind of stuff. And it's how do we get those people involved? I'd like to think that what I do is part of my job when I'm working with primary school children. So I work with primary school children from Salford, so inner city primary school children coming to North Wales. And hopefully that kind of education is really useful in terms of the future generations.
I think people have not been educated in the right way. One of the first things I wanted to do when I decided to go on my plastic-free venture was to find out what really was and really wasn't recyclable. And that is actually interesting because you suddenly realise just because something's got a little green triangle on the side does not necessarily mean that your area or your country can actually recycle it. And there's actually 7 different kinds of plastics that need to be recycled, and you need to actually get in touch with your own local establishment to find out if they recycle it or not. People often assume that their area or country is taking care of the plastic waste that they produce, and that's also not true. The UK's recycling target is often, their quota's often met because they send that rubbish out to other countries. Originally it was China and now it's Malaysia, and having read up on the small towns and cities around the area where they're burning the rubbish and storing the rubbish, a lot of those families are being made sick by our consumption and, you know, throwing away of products and it being sent to other countries. I mean, think about the education of that.
What is happening in schools at the moment is really exciting. Most of the kids that you meet these days have a very keen interest in environmental issues, and it's great. In order to make a change for the better in regards to this environmental crisis, we need to see changes in behaviour. And actually, children are a lot more responsive to these sorts of things. Generally, you know, the adults that have much more difficulty in changing their behaviour than children and people in education. You know, there is litter in the countryside and there is litter in the city. I think very often some of the litter that is generated is accidental litter. It actually comes out of the bins that people put their rubbish in. That said, you know, some people do litter, and I see that as more of an issue with their own mentality as to how they treat the planet.
Farmers use a lot of plastic to wrap their hay bales, to be used for polytunnels, to put their plants in, and they are also addressing the situation that they don't have the facilities to recycle those. So I think in regards to whether it's more prevalent in the city or the country, I think it's both.
The best way to try and reduce the amount of plastic you use is to actually look in your bin, try and see what it is that you're going through a lot of, and see whether there's any sort of simple swaps that you can make. You know, is this available in paper packaging? Is this available in card packaging? Can I get this in glass? You know, if you're reusing your own containers, then the need for new packaging and single-use packaging, you know, drops significantly.
I think, you know, what I said about bringing it back to local, I think that's really important. You know, if we all picked up a couple of bits of rubbish every time that we went out, then there wouldn't be that much rubbish. I mean, obviously, if nobody dropped it in the first place, then that would be even better. It's not a big deal picking up a couple of plastic bottles when you're out and about and putting them in the nearest bin. And if we all did that and didn't make a big deal about it, then I think there'd be a lot less rubbish around.
First of all, I think the most important one is to make sure that you try to source your food from places that either supermarkets that offer you alternatives to plastic packaging, or to find other shops that don't use plastic packaging. For example, I go to a veg store in Birkenhead that have very little plastic packaging, and I just put what I want in a basket and pay for it. It's cheaper, in fact. There's a much wider variety of vegetables and there's no plastic, so I can do my whole weekly shop with no plastic.
I don't think that the answer is more bins, because I think really the answer is more social responsibility. It's taking your rubbish home, leaving your bins in the countryside where animals can access it at night and take what you carefully put in the bin back out is an issue. Really what you need to be doing is taking it home, making sure that it's put in the right bin for recycling and things like that. I think gone are the days where, you know, you should be able to go to a park and overflow the bins on a hot day and expect the councils to take it away. really more emphasis needs to be put on people to take their litter home with them. You know, if you've got the time and energy to take it to a beauty spot, you should take the rubbish home with you.
I don't think the council are doing enough to help, considering other countries have recyclable boxes for individual types of materials. I don't understand how it makes sense to throw stuff in one container and then have them sort them out in mass facilities, when it would seem easier to me that they provide us with the boxes to separate the glass, the cardboard. And also I think that helps to educate people about what really is recyclable.